So good evening, all of you that have attended. If late people waltz in, that's fine. They're just going to have to take a seat and maybe watch the video after of this posting. In 2019, I was looking to learn how to work with teams remotely, and I stumbled upon this wonderful website called Chingu.io. And I was impressed. They actually had this sign up form. You had to sign up and you had to submit a project to get accepted. It wasn't just one of these things where like, yeah, I could participate. You actually had to prove that you were committed. So you had to submit what was called a solo project back then. And once you got accepted, you got formed into a team, and then you had a few weeks to build something together. And they had, kind of parameters around it. Of how to operate it, and you had all these facilitators checking the work. I was just, this is amazing. And so I had a wonderful experience. And when they were reviewing the projects, or when I was getting introduced, Chance, the founder, reaches out to me and says, "You're in Barrie?" I was like, "Yes." "You know where Barrie is?" He says, "I grew up in Cookstown." And I was blown away. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So Chance McAllister, he did grow up in Cookstown. He went to the University of Toronto, and then he decided to teach English in Seoul, South Korea for 4 years. But he wasn't done with that. He became a digital nomad in 2016. So he's been doing it since 2016. He's traveled all over the world. I had a whole list here. He lived and worked from, oh man, it's an extensive list. Here we go. Seoul, Korea, Waterloo, Ontario. I'm going to butcher these names. Bucharest, Romania, Malaysia, Czechia. I apologize if I did one with Bangkok, Vietnam, now Georgia. He's been all over the world working remotely. So he knows something about working with teams and communicating. And Chingu, sorry, I apologize, .io it fulfills his mission and his passion. And his passion is really the intersection of education and technology. So he creates ways of, it creates a method, and I'm going to let him explain it appropriately, of bringing people together. And it's a unique experience for anyone that participates. And right now, he also is an experienced designer at On Deck. So he can talk a little bit more about that once that's all involved. I'm going to let Chance just run the show here. I just want to thank him, first of all, for joining us. It was an honor that we had a local Cookstownian, I don't know what to actually take the time, especially at 2:30 in the morning where he is. So big round of applause. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Chance McAllister.
Thanks for that super kind intro. Yeah, that was funny, reaching out like, "Hey, you know Barrie?" I remember that, because anytime I see it, you don't see too often someone from Barrie come in, and people from all over the world, and then Barrie, what? Yeah, and that's Barrie was the place actually where I would go to the movies or to the mall. It was either like Barrie or Newmarket. They were kind of like in the middle back then. Yeah, and the Barrie's closer. And then always cottage life, people going to the cottage, the trailer, that sort of thing, always driving through. My grandma lives right by Georgian right now. Those are the apartment complexes, like a student house. Yeah. Okay, so it is 3 in the morning here, so I'm probably going to be a little out of it, but we're going to do it a little more interactive, I guess. I will share my screen, and we'll just sort of go through. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to get the chat going somewhere. I guess, how can we start here? I'll show Chingu first and maybe tell a little bit about how it started and the thinking around it. And then we can go from there and talk about how project management stuff, people working from different countries. We can go wherever you want, really. Cohort-based learning, project-based learning. These are all things I'm super interested. Also, if you're wanting the digital nomad stuff, async versus sync, all of this. So first we have Chingu. This is the website. I started this in 2016. Yes, I think so. I had just gotten back from Korea. I was joining a coding bootcamp called Hack Reactor, if anyone knows Hack Reactor, based in San Francisco. And back then, the coding boot camps, they were basically guaranteed to a job. I think it was like 98% was their guarantee. And so I was like, wow, sold. Okay, I want to transition. So I got to back up a little bit. I was teaching. I've always wanted to be in education, but was a little bit disillusioned with the teaching role and how I wanted to think about what was possible. I think in the 21st century, we have a lot of things that are changing really fast, and it's important that we have ways to adapt. And so that's when I wanted to get into programming. First, it was design. That's actually my first, how I got into it, reading books around design. I was like, wow, I love this, but I want to build stuff. So that's how I got into coding. Joined this boot camp, and I don't know how familiar, has anyone ever been to a boot camp or know anything about them? Yeah, have you been to one?
I just finished one. Before I speak, my name is Walid. I live in Birmingham, UK, and after COVID, we are lucky here in the United Kingdom that there's like a lot of initiatives, and one of them was the School of Code, which is like a free boot camp, but it's a good quality free code camp. And yes, I graduated from School of Code, and yeah, it's quite interesting. It's like an accelerator of learning where you learn like so many stuff, and each, like, I don't know, it's different like in each bootcamp, and yeah, and it's quite interesting. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Welcome. Yeah, I think I've heard of that one. I have to check out to see if it was the right one, the one I'm thinking of. Because I remember reading about one UK that was free, and it was around when I first started. So has it been around for a long time? I wonder if it's the same one.
I think maybe this is we are the 5th boot camp. I think it started like a year and a half ago. Yes, there's there's also other initiatives like this one is around Birmingham, which is like a city 2 hours from London. There is like I think another one in London, which also in the same format, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, they are really cool.
If you can share the link, if ever anyone who's outside of UK can join, I would like to take a peek at it.
Yes, I'll share the link.
Thank you.
And was it remote as well?
Yeah, it was remote. It was remote. Everything was remote, but yeah, it was really fun. Really, I have studied before, other things, but yeah, it was like the best learning experience, and I enjoyed it very much. They literally the guy who started it, his name is Chris Maya. He definitely worked very hard to make it like a high quality boot camp. And the added bonus is like we have already signed that we will not look for jobs only through the School of Code, and really they are really doing everything for us to get into the job market. They teamed with a recruitment company, and like we just graduated like 10 days ago, and I think I have applied like for 12 jobs, and I got only one interview, but in the pipeline it's also like 7 jobs. I don't know, that depends, like they on the companies, but yeah, there is also very good it's really a great initiative, and yeah, it's not they said it's not 98% employment, but really if someone wants to get a job, he or she will get a job, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's free. I wonder how is it a charity thing, or I wonder how they recruitment maybe is their payment model?
That's part of it. By the way, in the UK, it's like I don't know. Like it's like I don't know. communism and capitalism combined. They have things that are not. That's maybe in Europe, like where like the clash between it's now it's now the government after COVID is because there was a lot of people who are furloughed and jobs lost in the UK. So the government, especially like Birmingham is like the second biggest city in the UK, is giving money also for these boot camps. So it's partly funded by the government of the UK, and also recruitment fees, and also that we had a sponsor called Purple Pricks, which is the largest state agent, virtual state, the largest state agent, but they are more virtual state agent. And so far it's is going forward strong. And the interesting thing is, I think the first boot camp was taught by Chris Maya. He's a very intelligent person, and who taught us this in the fifth boot camp were his students, and they were really great and lovely. And for us it was a 13-week boot camp, and yeah, in this one also they added like C# part of the tech stack, and yeah, it was really interesting all the way through. And yeah, it was also for me a chance to meet a lot of amazing people.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is kind of wild too that you said in Europe different. Sometimes I'll have conversations with people that are in the Chane community, and they'll be from, a lot of people are from Europe and that sort of thing. And the conversation come up will be like US student debt or something, which is, just on a whole different level. Like Canadian student debt's pretty bad too, but nothing compared to the US. But then someone from Germany will be like, what is student debt? Like, my university, I didn't pay for that. What? Student debt? That's like Germany. You're thinking, wow, it's crazy. Yeah, nuts. So that, and it's funny also you said that it was one of the best learning experiences you ever had was at this coding bootcamp.
Definitely, it was one of the best learning experience. So like Chris Maya, he has a PhD in artificial intelligence, and he is trying to bring people from from diverse background into tech. And so like the way it is taught, it's like, I don't know, in the morning we start with squats. So it's like an important part of the part of the day, which is like the first for us, just to get our energy up. But after that, it's just like 30 minutes, and then we go into pair programming, and this is like the typical day. Like then after that, we go 30 minutes in pair programming, like tackling like maybe a tutorial, a task, code wars, or trying to build something. And every Friday it's called Hackathon Friday, where we try to build a project within that day and then show what we have built. And as the weeks progress, it becomes like for us it becomes a lot more easier. And I quite impressed how much did I learn in that 13 weeks. And also when it came like to the final to the final weeks, we started to have bigger teams and implementing everything in agile methodology. Everything was remote, but yeah, and really all of us had an excellent time. And even when it has already officially finished, but we do like go back like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday just to say hi, and also to continue with the building our skills, but also like to catch up with the with the boot campers. We call ourselves the blob. I don't know why. This is like one of the boot campers have one of the coaches have called us that. And yeah, it's unlike any other learning experience that I have been through. And it is like interesting, and really like I think like after that bootcamp, I am I started like to I have tried to before like to learn on my own. But after that bootcamp, yeah, it wasn't sound like tech, about tech programming, and that's what the concept, how it is an ever-changing environment, and yeah, how you need to be adaptive, working within it, within a team, and it was really great.
That's awesome. And it hits on several different things. You have accountability there. Everyone's meeting in the morning, and then you're getting together and sort of, you have to do that. Like that's the issue with the self-directed learning. A lot of the times it's difficult. It's kind of like going to the gym. It's easy not to go. You also have the community there. The fact that you guys are going back to hang out, there's obviously a sense of community. These are like things that maybe people don't think about that much. Maybe in universities don't think about that as much. They're so huge. And then learning through doing. You're building things, hackathons, working on challenges. These are all things that they're like has anybody ever heard of the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle?
Yep.
Yeah, it's those. So I think a lot of times, like, you can watch tutorials, and don't really get anywhere. And that's sort of, the majority of time spent. But that 20% where you're building a project, doing a challenge of some point, like basically anywhere where you get out of your comfort zone, that's like where 80% of your output, like your learning output, will come in. And so this is kind of what zoned me into this realm. So where we have team projects, what it is now, but to kind of jump back in there, I think it's a perfect segue. Thank you for that. I was in this coding bootcamp in the pre-work part of it. And keep in mind, this one wasn't free. It was almost 18,000 US. So I was putting my savings into this. So this is 2015, and this is remote in 2015, and remote wasn't normal. This is before COVID. And so I was like, okay, it's going to guarantee me a job. It was in San Francisco. It had all these, fancy, felt pretty fancy. A friend of mine had gone through it, got a job. He was from the US. I get in and I'm doing the pre-work, and I find out that the job guarantee doesn't count for me because I'm Canadian. And I was like, what? And they're like, oh, it was in the fine print. You didn't see? I was like, what? Because it's a lot of money, and I feel like you would want to tell somebody that if you were going to do that. So after that, I kind of lost trust and pulled out of it. But what I did learn when I was there was, wow, this is like the pre-work was amazing, just to be around other people who were, actively learning how to code. Because I was in Alliston at the time when I was doing this. I'd left Korea, moved in Europe. My partner at the time was in Europe, and then came back to Canada, and I was in Alliston. No one in my family, none of my friends have been in programming. No one had any idea what I was working on. So like, you're working on coding problems and you're struggling, and it's like, how do you do this? Who do you talk to? Basically no one to talk to. So this is where the coding bootcamp, I was like, wow, having this remote community. It was in a Slack group at the time, and I just loved it. And this is even despite the person who had joined, who was running it, like the kind of community facilitator, did not want to be there at all. I think it was a grad that was hired and then was like, I don't want to be here. But despite that, it was just amazing. But I pulled out because I was like, I just felt the trust was gone. It took like I forget what it was, maybe like 3,000 hit for the deposit, but whatever. So then I go to freeCodeCamp, and I put a post in the forum basically saying, hey, I just left a bootcamp. It was I love the feeling of it. Does anybody want to code and do freeCodeCamp together? And then a bunch of people did, and that's kind of how it snowballed from there, and how we kind of built it up from there. And the focus from the very beginning was basically like, the idea is, okay, you bring people together, what can happen? Like, how can you use that? You have community, makes you feel more accountable. So we would have going through freeCodeCamp together, or one of the things we learned pretty early was there was someone who did a speed run, and it was basically like, let's build as many projects as we can in 1 month. And that just became super popular. Everyone was excited because they're building the project, and you had to write an article. The person was P1XT, if anyone's ever heard of the P1XT guides. They're some pretty awesome guides. Actually, if I'll find that afterwards, because they're really good open source guides of learning paths that might be useful for anyone. And so that kind of just getting a feeling of, oh, people are really interested in this. This seems to be really helpful for people, and got into teams, pair programming. In the early days of Paul was saying, it was a little more structured when Paul was there, but back then it was like, sign up. Okay, let's launch 80 teams with like 700 people. At that point, it was just really me doing it with people helping here and there. But so you can imagine the chaos of that, but it was very interesting. And so that's kind of like how it came to be, where the mindset around it, sort of just learning through doing, both from people learning programming, but also from like my perspective of starting the community and ultimately what it became. And people just joining, and it was very open source in that way. And even co-founders, Jim and Musab, they were in the cohorts. Jim was in one of the very early ones, and Musab came shortly after. And it's kind of wild. Jim is a co-founder with me. I've never actually met him in person, but we've talked basically every day for the last 4 years. And Musab, I've met a few times. He was from Sudan, but his family is they're like diplomat. He had like a diplomat life. So he grew up in Jordan, all over. I met him in Amsterdam, where he works at booking.com in Amsterdam. So I met him there and somewhere else, maybe the UK. Yeah, so that kind of a little bit around Chingu, how it started. And now I guess we'll walk through a little bit around project management. I found this is from an older style. I don't know, Paul, was this the one you were around when you were in here?
I don't think so. I think there was a kind of Medium articles, or almost the handbook that kind of showed us, but it did have kind of a similar flow chart.
Okay, I'll go over this one because I think it's pretty simple. It's probably the most simple version we've had. It's probably the clearest as well. First, to get a sense of what are people's experience in teams, working in teams. It could be generally, or the project management specifically. Like, is anyone familiar with different tools?
What do you mean by tools? Like what tools we use to work in teams?
Yeah, let's say project man, like let's say like Trello, GitHub.
Trello, GitHub, Slack, and there was one, freeCodeCamp, where you can track your time and stuff like that. There's a new one that just came. I think it's new. It's Miro.
Oh yeah, I use that. That's pretty cool. This program here, it's Figma's FigJam. It's a straight competitor to Miro. I think people are pretty freaked out at Miro right now because it's awesome. Recommend it. So anyway, so we have Trello, GitHub. You said use Slack. Anyone use Discord? I'm curious, what kind of communities are you in Discord? What would they be? Program related or?
Coding. Sorry. Coding.
No. I talk a lot. Go ahead.
Coding for freeCodeCamp and some maker group that I got invited. They're at one of our meetings.
Nice. Hey, did anybody hear Microsoft just tried to buy Discord? 13 billion.
Curious.
They are just in a buying spree. They bought GitHub and they are just going at it. And I don't know. They are like doing like aggressive. They want to have that share in the market. So,
which is crazy considering Microsoft's history. Like GitHub said no. 13 billion. They said no thanks. Yeah. So this is an interesting topic we can get into if you want as well. This is community right now is absolutely exploding. I don't know if it's partly COVID, people are going into different niches. So that's an example. Microsoft just tried to buy them for 13 billion. There's several different tools right now that have recently, there's like a lot of capital, venture capital is pouring into community rated products. Like there's one called orbit.love. It's basically just a community management tool or like shows metrics like a CRM for community. I think they got 10 million. ComSoar is another one. ComSoar, they're highly funded. What else? Like Clubhouse or things like that. There, so much is going into the community. It's an interesting topic. I think it's also why you were saying with the coding bootcamp, partly why it was so beneficial. There's a community within it. And this is also why Chingu has been valuable for people in a lot of ways, a sense of community, really kind of wild. Okay, so we have Trello, GitHub, and we have different types of tools as well. So these are more communication tools. Circle's another one.
You guys, know Asana?
Yeah, Asana would be up here with. I never actually used Asana. Has anyone used that?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it for work related or?
Work related, yeah. I was a personal assistant of manager, so I had to book his stuff, and we were in like different departments, so we kind of made groups in it and stuff like that.
Cool. I'm curious, Paul, what do you use at work?
So I work for the Canadian federal government. Since COVID, they introduced Teams. And I was just complaining about this with some of my coworkers. We had a full year during the pandemic to use MS Teams, and now they want to implement security measures again. So basically take away the tool. Nothing's really changed. So yeah, it was, Teams has a lot of features that I was actually, I liked. I didn't think I'd like a Microsoft product as much as I do, but yeah, it was a game changer for us at work.
Wow, I'm taking it away.
In the chat, there's Jira. I don't know if I'm like pronouncing it correctly. It's G-I.
Oh yeah, yeah. That'd be up here. Task management, I think.
Is it? Yeah, that's almost like task and bug management almost, right? Yeah, like a Bugzilla type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys use WebEx?
No, what's WebEx?
WebEx is similar to Teams, but I think Teams is way better than WebEx.
Yeah, Tamoya said Studio Metry. Never heard of it. Studio Metry. I have to check that one out.
METRI?
STU, like studio, and then Metry, MTRY. Yeah, all together.
Yeah, I'm using in my job.
Oh yeah?
What is it, Tamoya?
Yeah, I'm using Studiometry.
And what kind of tool is it?
So it's kind of managing working hours or managing clients' bills.
Interesting.
Check it out.
Cool. And what about personal product? Does anybody use like Todoist? Personal productivity, task management?
Do you know, I don't know if it's Nitro or Nitro or something like that. It's like NITRO. You can do your to-do list and share it with other people as well. And yeah.
I for my personal stuff, I went with Trello, and it's hard to switch because it pretty much does what I need in the way I want to do it. So
yeah, I just switched. I was using Trello for maybe 2 or 3 years for my personal stuff. I was using GTD, if anyone knows that.
Yeah, I do.
Getting things done. It's pretty cool. Or ZTD is another one that's a simplified version. It's pretty good. I just switched from that to, I'm starting Roam Research, if anyone's heard of that, Roam Research. It is nuts. The idea is networked thought. So you can connect your notes together, basically. Like you're linking them. It shows a graph of how they all connect. Yeah, I recommend checking it out. It's kind of wild.
Actually, I might have to look into that because originally I had a mind map that sort of tracked everything, and then I transitioned to Trello. So it'd be an interesting thing to switch. Yeah, and that's the Roam Research, you said?
Yeah, Roam Research. It's pretty wild. I added my Kindle highlights into it. You can export your Kindle highlights into it. And so I read a lot. So I thought there's 170 books of highlights, and I highlight way too much as well. And then, so I can just pick a word. Like I was talking to a friend from Romania, And I said, watch this. And I just write Romania. You make like a page out of it. And then it will show me anywhere in my entire, whatever, my system that has direct links or undirected links, or how, I forget how they say it, unlinked. But it basically just shows anything that has Romania in it. And so it shows all these different books, or if I have a note that says Romania, that will show up. It's just all connected. So I could just write whatever, like Germany or web development, and it will show anything that I have in there. So the idea is like people, you invest, your money compounds, maybe social capital, or your relationships, that sort of a compounding effect. And then this is allowing your ideas, your notes to compound as well. So it's pretty interesting there.
What's the name of the tool?
Rome Research. Yeah, right here. Yes, it is wild. Yeah, there's some really cool videos you can just watch on YouTube. I'll just give you a walkthrough. Okay, so we've got these different tools. What about, I'm curious what kind of communities people are in. So we said there was some dev communities. Paul said he was in a maker communities. Any other kinds, like an accountability community, or maybe like a
one community that also I'm part of is called Code Bar, and yes, they went virtual with COVID, and I think they have chapters all around the world. Started in London, but I think they have now chapters in, I think, States, Canada, China, even Africa, and yeah, it's just it's like volunteers start the chapter where people who want help in learning coding go to learn maybe in the various topics from HTML to React, and yeah, you in there you get the chance to meet an experienced developer, and that developer tries to help like in that topic that you, and it quite helped me a lot. I found it really interesting. Yes,
I have a question. So the mentor that you have, is it a one-on-one, or it's one mentor to a small group?
They, sometimes it's one-to-one. It's sometimes 2 students to 1 mentor. But yeah, it depends like in which area. So like if it's like very advanced, that would be like someone who has that experience. If it's some basics, it might be like some volunteer who already been to Code Bar and wants to volunteer to be as a coach, and it's a great community. Also, they have, I think, a Slack channel, their website, and yeah, I think I was in their open day, and they also like have like trying to expand also like in what topics like people want, and the person who's in charge, her name is Kimberly. She started it because there was nothing like that at the time when she began like helping like in London. It was in London, but now there's like a lot of stuff happening, and yeah, which is really great.
Cool. Really cool. Okay, let's jump over to, let's see, we've got different tools we've talked about. Okay, let's go through, we'll just do a quick walkthrough of this flow, and then I think we'll just see where people want to go. We can jump into soft skills. That's something else I enjoy talking about, and I think is pretty important for teams. But first we'll go through here. This is one that we used to have. So to give context here, Paul mentioned earlier that you would apply, as you were accepted, you'd be added to a team after you did the solo project. Or you could either make if you had your, it's basically a barrier we have to ensure a certain level of quality in a team, because there's a lot of issues around remote projects in teams, especially all teams in general. It's very difficult, especially if you have them at scale and in remote, or even if you're at work. People have probably had issues around teams. If anyone's on a team project at school, you definitely know the issues around that. So people get in, and first we have meet your team, set goals and expectations, set a team lead. Sometimes we would set that ahead of time. It all depends on what year or month or session when we were doing it, what our resources were like. We tried different things. And we've also tried different things as far as like how do you start? This is maybe it gets into some more like psychological things around learning. You have this idea of autonomy. Does anybody know this word autonomy? So it's basically like you have free will to do something. And as far as like in a learning context, or from like designing learning program context, at least, you have like levers. You know, if you give people more autonomy, they will commit more to things usually. But if you give them more freedom to do something, it actually becomes a lot more difficult to do, especially if you have a group. An example of this would be, there's a study where they found that people they had a bunch of different cereal types in a grocery store. So they had one kind where there was like 20 or 30 different cereals in the grocery store. And then they had another one where they had like 2 or 3. And so they watched them and calculated how much, like the purchasing habits. And when there was only 2 options, people bought them a lot more. But when there was all these ones, they didn't know what to do and they just left. So it was kind of wild to think that people will buy more if there's less. Like people will act more is the idea. It's more, you can make sense of it. And so we've kind of gone back and forth. I think probably the best way, if you're going to do teams, would be if people you don't know, or you don't know what everyone's skill level is necessarily, is you clone a project. I think this is probably the best way to do something. It's very simple. You can show the project, you can see, okay, we have to clone this, like we have to break the features down. Whereas the opposite of that would be making it up from scratch, where you have to agree on a project. And to be honest, we've done that for most of the time, just because it gives people more autonomy is the main idea. But I think if you want highest percentage of completion, you'd want to go with cloning a project. Has anyone here cloned? You finished a boot camp. You've definitely done it. Paul definitely has, I'm assuming, cloned projects. Anybody cloned any projects before?
Oh, yes, I did actually. I have like 6 years of experiences in professional development, working with major IT companies.
Nice. And so you cloned projects before while you were learning, or even after?
Before as well and after as well. So the last company which I work for, the Infosys, for which we are working for a Telenet. It's a European telecom operator. For them, we have developed a online virus scanning tool for the file scanning, something like that.
Cool. Okay, so then we have define your workflow. So this would be for the team to basically set what their workflow is. And this could be, we've had some times where we would prescribe this, but basically the team can set how they're going to work. Set the rules. This is super important when you're working in a team, to set these ground rules early on. Because otherwise people will do their own thing and it just gets really confusing. And then you set up your dev environment. Define your MVP, really big deal. And this is where you can start getting into your different tools. And actually, we didn't do one of the main ones. It doesn't actually get a lot of love.
Sorry,
anymore.
what
does
MVP mean?
MVP is, so in this context, is like minimal viable project or minimal viable product. Is the minimal viable product is the main, where that comes from is the lean startup world, I think, is probably where that comes from. If anyone's familiar with the lean startup and that whole world, but I just changed it to minimal viable project, just because we're doing projects. And yeah, so I would say simplest would be like something like Google Docs, where people can just collaborate live. People use whatever. They can use GitHub. People now will use Trello, or people now will even like Figma. There's a lot that happens, I see, with teams using Figma. It's pretty interesting how they'll do it. So the tool doesn't really matter. Overall, I would say tool doesn't matter as much as making things simple. When things are more complicated, it gets harder to complete things, but as simple as possible. Is anyone familiar with sprints? I'm sure. Yeah. Paul, do you use Sprint at work? Do you use sprints at work?
No, but I wish they did.
Yeah.
Because during the Chingu experience, it was really, we decided as a team to make every week a sprint. So because we had we decided on a night to meet up, the whole team, we would cover what we accomplished that week, and then we'd set new goals. And it follows, and you can probably verify this or other people, the agile kind of methodology or Scrum. And yeah, as opposed to what typically what we're used to at work is, yeah, I'll get it done when I get it done. It's like, what does that even mean? Like what part of the project? Like there's no scope, right? Where I think the sprint I witnessed, you really get to chunk it down. We're not talking about the project. We're talking about this feature, this widget. How did you do on that widget? And that was really mind opening, just to experience a sprint. I don't know if other people have had similar experiences.
Anybody else use sprints at work or in their own life somehow?
Oh, yes, I've used it at work. Oh, sorry, someone was continuing. Yeah, please go ahead. I apologize.
You want to go there?
It's okay. You can go.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I have used a sprint while I was working. So it's like 1.5 weeks of a sprint, or it can be up to 2 weeks. So we'll be given a task in that sprint. We are supposed to complete, deploy, and test everything during that 2 weeks itself, and then it will go to further pre-production and then production.
Yeah, perfect. It's basically cycle, the idea of just cycling through. You have a set time. Some people do 2 weeks, week and a half, 1 week, whatever it is. And there's all these, be careful if you ever get too into it, because there's endless books and people are very opinionated around this stuff. Actually, a co-founder, Jim, he's much more knowledgeable about this. He was a Scrum Master earlier in his career, or even up recently, he was a Scrum Master. So there's a lot. It's kind of a wild world to get involved. I kind of prefer as simple as possible and go from there. But yeah, it is interesting if anyone wants to get into it a little bit. And then you have stand-ups too. These are awesome. And basically, again, can be different things, but the common one is, the idea is around like really quickly sync up, not staying around so much. The idea, I think, or the heads in the word, they would stand up and then do a quick like 15-minute meeting. I think that's where it originated. And what are the questions? What have you been working on? What will you work on? And what are your blockers? Those are the normal ones. And blocker being like, what are you stuck on? What's bothering you? That sort of thing. So that those are the common questions for that. And team progress review. I don't think people actually did this one a lot, to be honest, for this particular one. But it would just be to review progress. I think it would depends on what the name, how people organize things. But yeah, another one would be code review and merge. This one's pretty. These ones are kind of, you'd meet at the end of the week or beginning of the week whenever you're doing your review of the past week and then prepping for the next one. These ones, I'll just skip some of these. Deploy, MVP1, document this experiments. Curious, how many people have documented the experience after they finish a project while they're learning? Does anybody do that? Yeah? That's awesome. Paul, you ever dabble in some proper documentation?
I'd like to say I do all the time. I would say it's half. It's a shame because when I do it, I go all out. But when it's just a scribble here or there, or if it's on a text file, it's actually lost knowledge, I would say.
This is I forget what company it is. A company recently I heard they had this rule in the company that if someone asks the question twice, it has to be added to a doc somewhere. And then from that on, if anyone asks the question, people aren't allowed to answer it. They only are allowed to give the link. And the idea is just not like anything that's repeatable, document it, and then it's the source of truth. Everybody go there.
I like that. That's efficient.
Yeah, I forget what company that is. I have to think about it. So that's the basic roadmap we used before, and we use something, I don't know how similar it is to this now. It's a little more complex, but a little more fully fleshed out. This is one we used to use, and then we would give just suggested actions, this sort of thing.
So can I just ask a question, Chance? Was this through trial and error, like that first experiment or that first cohort? Did you already have a roadmap in your mind, or was this like things went off the rails and you were like, oh, we needed to handhold a little bit?
Everything was experiment, everything. I could probably find the original cohort. I've got all my Slacks still here. Wow. I didn't delete all of them. Red Pandas. It's one of these ones. So all these are different cohorts. I guess I should say that as well. The way it was done before was it would be named after an animal in the earlier days, because I'm from Cookstown area, kind of countryside. I grew up on the farm, and my mom actually, as a hobby, would rehabilitate injured animals, wild animals, as like a passion project. So I grew up with like baby raccoons and stuff around, and we would so it'd be like if a mom raccoon died, got hit by a car, someone would find the babies and they would bring them to my mom. And so we'd have these big raccoons. So I named these after animals. So everything was pure trial and error. Even now, pure trial and error. This is kind of a learning philosophy. I think the faster people get to feeling pain or frustration is probably a good mental model for how often they're going to like the output of learning. Because so often I've seen this literally with thousands of people now, they'll just do what's easy. Like watching tutorial videos is just another form of procrastination, I would say.
Okay, so say that again. Because that sounded like some sage advice there. So the quickest somebody can get to point of pain,
frustration,
so like point of
like
frustration.
You're like, I don't know what to do. Like, I think if someone were to ask, like, I'm going to learn programming, what should I do? Like, how should I structure it? And let's say I'm going to do freeCodeCamp. I would say, okay, the first thing you should do is go to wherever the first project is and just try to do that. And then go from there. Because then you're like, okay, you go there and you go, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I have zero idea. But you're starting from the context of you're trying to do something specific. Like, you're trying to make this landing page, as opposed to the idea of like starting and being like, okay, I'm going to learn, these certain tags or whatever. There's no like context around it. So you're not
I see. It's almost like, it's like before we started the official meeting, language learners. When I talk to language learners, it's like, how do you learn language? They're like, you speak the language. I said, yeah, but do you learn the grammar? They're like, no, you speak the language. Even if you know 5 words, you use those 5 words, and then you pick up another word, and then you use that word. It's kind of backwards how it's taught in school. Is let's start by teaching grammar, and then let's get the kids lost on competence. Like, they should actually force kids just to speak the language. But yeah, okay. Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it. It's basically learning through doing is the idea, but there's a lot of other areas where this is more common. Like, what would be an example? Chingu, we've been actually talking about this a little bit, trying to flesh this idea out. But there's an example with Netflix. They have this crazy thing they do with their servers. I forget what it's called, but they basically like kill servers, and this is a way to make it to make the whole system more robust. So just like kill servers, and then people have to adapt and figure it out. And so they're like stress testing their whole system, stress testing their teams. So like they have, it's like world class. They are top of class in doing this particular thing. Obviously they changed the game as far as streaming. And so they need their stuff to be top notch. And that's actually a tactic they do. So they are feeling the pain as a strategy, or are feeling frustration as a strategy. No, that's not frustration. That's like, your servers are down and you're causing issues. So that's a similar type idea, I think. So that's what I would suggest for people. And this is why Chingu it's never had like teachers necessarily, like quote teachers.
I have a question. So like when you talk about animals, is it like you relate to just part of the project? Maybe we call this first part the raccoon, the other one maybe call it the elephant, and the other one the lion, or is it just it depends like on what stage, like I don't know. That maybe the sprint, we call the sprint the raccoon, or we call it any other name maybe. What is it like in relation to animal names? It's just a thing to make it fun and interesting.
Yeah, just named it. This is actually it kind of gets into the community stuff. It's kind of interesting. People took to the animal names for the cohorts like a part of their identity. They put it in their like LinkedIn or their Twitter bios. And similar, like what did you say that your group, you call each other, your coding bootcamp?
We were the geckos.
Yeah, the geckos. And
we were the hand.
Yeah, so it's I think it's almost arbitrary what the name is, but if you can get a group to, they identify with it, and it's kind of like an interesting thing. Interestingly though, so Paul, you were the geckos. I think we changed at that point. So that was tier 2. You were geckos for tier 2 at that point?
I think so.
Yeah, so we switched it to calling to the program voyages instead of animal names. And then we called the different tiers animal names just to keep the animal thing involved. Kind of silly, but yeah, that's why that was there. I don't know. Maybe just let me know what people are interested in, and we can go from there. As people might know Trello, might not know Trello. GitHub might know GitHub.
So I want to hear some stories, some success stories, and some epic failures, or learning experience, I should say. What do you notice about just the teams that really do well and the teams that just struggle? Where do you see the common things happening over and over and over, and you're just like, oh, it's like clockwork again? What do you see?
I would say probably the most common thing would be how it begins, like how it gets started. It seems kind of silly in a way, but like we've put a lot of thought around how do you get people to show up and get going right away? Because if you don't do that, people will be like, it's like a signal, like, oh, maybe this isn't the right for me, or maybe something they're not interested. And so a big issue is getting people to actually just jump in and be engaged. Because I think with strangers come together and it's a little bit going to be scary a little bit for people. And even in case where you do like pair programming, I've had cases where I would send people for pair programming, they signed up for it, and you literally make a channel for them and you have a template message saying like, here you're in pair programming, you are been matched, here's what you can do next. And no one says anything, and no one says something. And I'll message both of them like, hey, what happened there? Are you talking somewhere else? And they're like, no, I was waiting for the other person to talk. And then the other person, oh, I was waiting for the other person to talk. And so neither of them talk. This is like these weird human things that are around. Yeah, so that would be like, if a team has someone that has that just ready to go, it really changes the dynamic.
When you talk about a team, like I know it varies, number varies, but approximately how many people are we talking about?
3 to 5 would be the norm. We've done anything in the very early days. It kind of goes what Paul said with the experimenting and seeing. Okay, let's see whatever. I think one of the first projects was like, who wants to build some video game? We made some video game. I forgot what it was. And 20 people signed up. So we're like, okay, let's do it. And so it was just 20 of us in a Slack channel navigating through this, and it got built eventually, but it was kind of wild. And then scoped it down to maybe, let's say 6-7 people. That was way too much, and landed on 3 to 5. I'd say 3 is probably the best, like as far as success of completion. People prefer more, even though it's a weird thing. People prefer more because they feel like more people means more of a team, but it actually makes things a lot more, complexity becomes much higher to complete it. Like, even just to set up scheduling. Should probably also mention this. This is, the teams are lots of different countries. So this is the different countries that have been involved in Chingu over the years. And so there's just a lot.
Question. So what's the goal and the outcome? For example, you have people wanting to build a game, and at the end of the day, are you selling that software or product or project? Is it just a fun activity that you do, or like what's the end goal of it?
The end goal is learning. That's completely always the end goal. So this is one thing that's, I think, is difficult in the modern like education climate, where people view learning as like someone talks at me and I learn the thing, or like I'm watching a video and I learn the thing. Like this is just how we've been doing it for a long time, or at least how we think it's been happening. It's our kind of our idea of education a lot of the time. And I kind of just reject that. I think content, learning content, you could think of that as a teacher, or you could think of that as a book. That used to be scarce. Like, you know, if you want to go historically, before the printing press, one book would cost, if you had a book, you were a multimillionaire. Yeah, it was the equivalent of a mansion, because people wrote it by hand. Basically, only church people could read it. And it was just crazy. Whereas now, zoom into now, the problem for learners is actually the opposite. There's too much content. There's too much. Where do you go? Like, how do you know this is the better than this one? And this is like, most people that come to Chingu, probably the most common thing people say is like, I'm just so tired of doing tutorials and not getting anywhere. I've been doing this for a year. I haven't gone anywhere. Or even we have people coming from boot camps a lot now. I don't know how some of them are cutting through. Like they have never built a project and they've graduated from a coding boot camp. I don't know how it happens.
You know, like when you talk also about teamwork, it's not, learning never stops. Like, even if you were in a boot camp, we've done a lot of projects in my boot camp. But the other thing is, like, people have varied experiences. It's not you learn just from programming. Like, you learn even from other people. Like, some people maybe have better organizational, skills. Some people maybe have an interesting way of tackling issues. So like it's also like learning from people. Also, like, this is like also important, because I think like everyone has a varied experience, and you could like definitely, when for me, while working in teams, like people are quite different. People have varied experience, how they think about the problem. Like, even like for me, when I it's not just about programming, it's just how they think about the problem. Like, when they talk about it, and you start like you realize it in a different way. You even like with I thought that I would struggle when it came to pair programming, but it was really helpful. Like, you have extra pair of eyes and a person with a different experience, and sometimes you might get stuck in your own, but when you are like two people as a pair or working as a team, you just reach out, like to maybe to the other person or to the group, and then there's like a lot of skills that is being transferred through the group, and you learn from the group as well as you learn like about tech. And the product always, I was really impressed. Like, the product always is amazing. It's not, and in terms of learning, it's just phenomenal how the output.
It's spot on. It's true.
Chance, before you get into the rubber duck technique, because you got my attention, how many teams would you say have gone through Chingu by now? If you could just guesstimate.
To guesstimate, I'd say probably somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000, depending on how you think of it. Like, how you think of a team.
Okay. Out of that number, how many are like, because we always hear of like nightmare scenarios, like you're with somebody that's, they took the project in a direction the other teammates. What's a percentage? Is it high, or is it?
For what?
Let's just say problem teams. Like I'm thinking like a problem team member, overbearing. Is it out of the 5,000? Is it
I would say it's hard to say because, like early on, majority of those, or a good portion of those teams came before we were more of like an open source and free. So we had, just blasting teams out left, right, and center. So I don't even know how because there was just too many things for me to keep track of. But I would say now, or even we're watching them more often, it's a rare situation where you'll have like a problem person in the team. But issues around communication, for sure, probably pretty common because a lot of people aren't used to being in a remote setting or team setting programming. It's a huge, like we can't really advertise that because it's not exciting to people. But probably the main thing people learn is soft skills or being like, GitHub, things like this. There's a lot of issues around how do you work in a team. And so I would say there's like a surface level issues that most teams face, but as far as like difficult people, I would say it's fairly rare, but it does happen because people, especially when you have people from all different countries, different cultures coming together, it can be interesting.
I have a question in regards to that. So there are different people from different countries. What are their level? I mean, I know everyone has different levels, but do you have like in a group you have like advanced to beginner stuff like that? And the reason I'm asking this is because I was recently in a group project at school, and I know everyone would be like, oh, but it was the best experience of my whole life. And one of the issues was that I feel like they were more advanced than me, and I felt like I didn't have anything to bring to the table. But what made it extraordinary is that people would come to me, and we were a small group, and be like, oh, you can't do that, but let's talk about it for the whole meeting. Like, let's put the project aside and focus on your problem. And then we can go as a group. So yeah, I guess my point was just like we have different knowledge. And when people meet in your group in Canggu, how do you tackle that? And how do you work towards that, stuff like that?
That's a great question. So we have kind of buckets, you could say, the tiers. How we set it up is you'll have tier 1, which is beginner. These are loosely defined, like, and keep in mind, these are people choose this. We have the solo projects, which we check, and then kind of if someone is definitely not in that level, then we can move them to wherever there is most appropriate. But it's general buckets. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so that's kind of where you get in, but you have beginner, intermediate, advanced. But even within those, there still can be a decent amount. Also, interesting side thing on this, men, it's wild how confident they are. I'm a tier 3, and it's, okay. They're just so much more confident for that. It's kind of one of those weird things, but yeah, so general buckets. I think there is interesting things around, you could mix people even more. Like, I think one day I would like to experiment more with that to see, it'd be more of like, how do you navigate, how do you organize that at scale where people could be okay with it? How do you make sure people are okay with it? Because I think in actuality, that's super helpful, both for the higher level and the beginners. In the case, like, someone helped you, like when someone helps somebody else, like they have to explain it. And when they have to explain it, it becomes more concrete. And this is actually gets into the rubber duck technique. Has anybody ever used this or know about it? Oh, this is cool. So this is a programming technique for debugging. It's basically a debugging trick where people actually get this rubber ducky as kind of a joke, but it can be anything. It could be a person, like pair programming. This is what the benefit of pair programming as well is, if you get stuck on something, the idea is you talk to this rubber duck and you try to explain what you're stuck on. But just the act of having to speak and think about it and try to explain it using words, it like unblocks you. And this is also why it's so helpful to mentor people or to explain things to people, is because you have to, when you have it in your brain, you're like, okay, I think I know what this is. But until you can actually explain it, you don't really know it that clearly. And so the process of having to explain something or talk through something, it really helps you understand it better. And I think it's also what we were talking, the thumbs up, you experience that in your teams, I'm sure at that boot camp in the pair programming, and that it's a really cool thing. There's a Wikipedia on it, actually, rubber duck technique, or maybe rubber ducky, something like that. Debugging. Yeah, I recommend checking that out. It's really cool. And I think that's kind of a decent segue, and then we'll kind of aim it down before I pass out.
Okay. Are you good for a few more minutes, or do you want to take a break? Or?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
if anyone wants to take a break, we can. That's fine too.
Just if people could just put a thumbs up if they're good to go.
Yeah.
Virtual or otherwise. None of you are good to go? You're all dying for a small break? Could we just take maybe a 5 or 7 minute break chance?
Yeah.
Just so everyone could, if you have to use the washroom, use the washroom. Just take a breather, regather. This is good information. That rubber duck technique, I didn't realize I was doing that every day for my job. I start compiling an email to explain why something's broken, and then just before I hit send, I'm like, oh, I think I know what the problem is. So now I have a technique to fall back on.
I'll find the Wikipedia for that.
Okay, I'll see you. I'm gonna head upstairs for a second, but 5 or 7 minutes, everybody.
Yes, so I think I might need to check out Chingu. One thing I've been doing solo work for so long. It certainly having a platform where I could collaborate a little bit more would probably be a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely useful, and people can do it. It's any kind of collaboration, I think, is good. People can reach out if they have that ability. Also, you can go to freeCodeCamp, things like that. Any kind of community, I think. But yeah, we just try to make it as easy as possible for people to do it and sort of set it all up. It's kind of our idea around it. Yeah. And cohort-based learning in general, there's a lot of cool programs that are doing this now. When we first started, it was kind of like a weird, lonely niche, I guess you could say. But because of COVID, all these education places, they've gone online. It's been cool to see, actually.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like Chingu is like it sound really interesting. It's not like, does it require like full-time commitment, or you can do it at your time, or
Yeah, it's mostly most people are part-time.
Part-time, okay.
Yeah.
It's not, the thing is like I have not done projects or a lot of projects, but the more you do, the more you get experience. You get more experience, and really, it's like and also you learn from other people. That's like another thing, which really, and I think it's an added bonus, which is, I think it's more on board. It's also essential in being a techie, or someone who's like involved with tech in general. Really, like, people have different skills, knowledge, and sometimes like opening just opening your eye to a different thing is valuable in itself.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the way things are moving too, things are going more remote. There's a lot more like collaboration with different people from different countries, different cultures. It's a lot different tools. Like, there's just a lot being mixed and matched. So things changing fast. I think it's great. It's great to learn these. Like, the better people can get at relearning things and learning new things. It definitely helps, for sure.
Like, I wasn't so successful in getting into that company. The company has like an offices in Birmingham, but the actual coding is done in Vietnam. So that's like interesting. They said they are able to scale up quite fast, but really, like, the term of like finding the clients and starting their so like it's when you talk about with COVID, it accelerated everything, but everything now, even like the jobs I'm applying for, some of them just require like 1 day in the office, and that can be flexible. Some of them like one every month, some one every 3 months. So like after COVID, everything has changed. So like it's not home working, but working through cyber is, I think it is there to stay. And
Yeah, we'll have to see how much it goes back. I know two people so far who are, let's say, like Google level talent, not necessarily at Google, but very high talent people who just quit their jobs because the people were like, their company was like, we're going to be going back to in-house again. And they're like, no, I'm not going back. If that's the case, I'm just going to leave because they can go wherever they want. So this is, I think it'll be interesting. I think I'll be so curious to see what happens, especially with big companies that have had to go remote. And what will they do? Like if they want to go, or do they even want to go back? Because it's very expensive. I just saw before we started, Google has saved $1 billion in the last year just because they're not having locations and all the perks that they pay for the employees. $1 billion.
But first, you have to unlock your device.
Well, Google's talking to me now. Oh my God.
That's crazy. What are your thoughts? I might have missed some of the conversation here, but at the beginning of the pandemic, people are like, oh, working remotely. Oh, and I had already been working a little bit remotely, so I was able to adjust relatively quickly. How about yourself, Chance? Did you already had the skill set? I think people are kind of catching up with a lot of other people that were experimenting with remote.
Yeah.
Now the pandemic has forced their hand.
Nothing changed for me because I've been doing this for a long time. No, I mean, look, when the lockdowns, I couldn't go to a co-working space, which actually was a decent change, like going to like cafes or whatever. Because that's one thing with working at home. You're working at home, and so it can really, you have to set clear boundaries for yourself. Like this is my workspace, or some people will do you might have heard, people will walk around the block, and then they wake up, walk around the block, and then come back or drive around the block just to feel like, okay, I'm in a new space now. This is a new situation. Because this is one of those counterintuitive things. I think big companies, I don't know if they think this now, but the idea was like, if people could work remotely, then maybe they'll be lazy or something. But in most cases, it's the opposite. People become more of workaholics. It's a lot easier to do that. And so you have to be like clear boundaries. Like the job that I work at on deck, there's no rules as far as when I start, how long I work, when it's like unlimited PTO in theory. I decide when I want to take a week off or 10 days or whatever. But in reality, they have to be constantly telling people like, you have to take time off. Like they'll say that because people won't do it.
Do you think it's because of, okay, question, was it always like that before the pandemic, or it changed with the pandemic?
Which part? The
workaholic part.
And I think that's just inherent with it. I don't think it changed I think there's more people who work remotely now, but I don't think people who worked remotely before, it was still the same dynamic. I think it's just, it probably depends on the work. Like if it's something you find interesting or intellectually challenging or whatever, then it has that. If you don't like the job, then maybe it wouldn't have that. But yeah, I would say no difference there.
Before the pandemic, I was doing both. I was remote and in the office. And the reason why I was kind of a workaholic is because I thought the same thing. I thought people would think I'm lazy, or what is she doing? Is she actually working? But then with the pandemic, lots of people were telling me that they have like burnt out as well. But the reason was different. The reason they said that was because everything is remote. So people expect you to be quick, answer email quick, answer WhatsApp message, be here quick. So I wanted to know what was because you have like a post and a pre and a post pandemic, so it would be cool to know your views.
Yeah, I think it's learning it's okay to be like, hey, couldn't get this done. This is like when I see this a lot in with people who've been doing this for a long time. I did it today earlier. I had another project got thrown on me, and then for that project, I'd say like, hey, sorry, something came up. I'll finish this on Monday. But they're like, oh, no worries at all. It's just like you understand it. And there are different weird little things people will do. Like everyone has their own style. This is kind of interesting around the remote work world, is that you optimize for your day. Like every day I just sort of optimize for it however I want. Like let's say a couple days ago, there was a hiking group going hiking. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to do hiking in the morning. And so I just worked a little bit later. I just sort of planned it like that. But for it's more like tactical things, like people will put in Slack, there'll be like their name or a little emoji. It'll be like, do not disturb, or, out of office, or sleeping, or focusing. And there are different tools too. Like we have one tool that people use called Clockwise, and it's a calendar tool that hooks up with Slack, and it will say what the person's doing, like deep work, don't bother, or something like that. And I actually put in my calendar often. I'll put like deep work sessions throughout the day. And so people know they can't book or try to book a meeting with me or anything. Yeah, but it's hard. It's something that's always changing.
I assume your managers they're of that mindset. Yeah, I find, especially in my work, it's been a big shift for the managers that were used to probably, going from office meeting to office meeting with their coffee, and they had to see people to assume that they were being busy. They've had to learn how to actually manage remotely. And I remember at the beginning, they were freaking out. They were like, we don't know if we agreed with this. And I said, did you hear the news from the Prime Minister? Like, it's not really your call, like right? They had to adjust quick. And, I kind of chuckled. It's a skill set that we can't get away from. I liked Chingu because, I had a chance to actually set up a remote situation. Now we're all in that same experiment, but probably not doing what we want to do in an enjoyable project. So yeah, I have no sympathy for the managers, but it's a learning experience.
Oh, for sure. It's tough. And it's one that I think it's never ending anything. It's a continuous thing, because something might happen, you might get into a bad habit, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm in a bad habit. And so I think there is benefits to the in person for different things. Absolutely. Like, for example, if you're starting a new company, in person's great because your idea is coming through, and just being around them, it's like a structure is nice. But
I remember anytime there was a great book, I'm thinking of different references when I was experimenting with remote before the pandemic. Was the gentleman, I want to say it was Jason Fried from Basecamp that wrote remote. And then there was another gentleman who worked with WordPress, A Year Without Pants. That was a funny book. But really the mindset that shifted for me is like, oh, I got to go in the office. For my unique situation, most of my managers are in Ottawa, and all my teammates were in Ottawa. So I would drive to an office, and I would call them on a phone, or I would talk to them versus email. And the argument in the book, I think it was remote from Jason Fried, was you're probably already working remote. Like people already have probably, and this is referring to office work and IT professionals, you're probably already talking to the person and, a few cubicles down the hallway remote anyways. It shouldn't be that big of an adjustment, but yeah, I think I'm curious to see what the after days are going to look like. I remember the arguments. What I was going to say, a lot of arguments when people are saying, "Oh, we need to have in person." Yahoo is going back to in person. There was old parts of IBM were going back to in person, and you almost want to chuckle, like Yahoo, yeah, a real innovative company. They're really, yeah, gotta get back together. Like, I don't know. It's just, I shake my head at some of the arguments, but
yeah.
Anyways, is there any other questions for Chance? Being a digital nomad or Chingu?
So 2 questions. So I know we've been talking about that a lot, but I didn't really wrap my head around what Chingu is. And the second thing is, there's a myth. I'll just say according to me, because most people would not agree with me. There's a myth around working remotely. You need to be a coder or a designer to do that. But I know there's other things that you can do, and I'm not talking about these gurus about online business, but like transcriber and stuff like that. So if someone random come to you and be like, hey, I want to start working remotely, another thing as well is that they think you need to have a lot and lots of money as well because of the traveling and stuff like that. So if someone comes to you and be like, hey, I want to start working remotely, I want to start being a digital nomad, what would be your advice?
Okay, so I'll start with the first one with Chingu. A quick overview, basically team projects, remote team projects for learning is basically what it is, and learning through doing. And yeah, it's a great question around what would you suggest for someone? For sure, coding designers, no, like that's a very, a lot of those people are digital nomads or can travel because it's just, they're from the computers, it makes sense. But I would probably tell them to look up the creator economy and just see what kind of roles are around there, or go on something like Upwork or Fiverr and just see the kind of roles people do, both overseas and in Canada, US, Amsterdam, wherever, all different price points. It's like everything you can imagine. Like, actually, I have an accountability buddy who I pay, and we meet every day and just have like talks about keeping me accountable and this sort of thing. And yeah, that's a job that like kind of wild to think. It's just like, okay, this person's going to be an accountability buddy. Anything I've had, graphic design would be one, transcribing, helping, like how do I make a podcast? People will help you with that. Yeah, you can think of basically anything. It's kind of wild. I think a lot of jobs are like, think of all the jobs that didn't exist when you were kids that are jobs now. Like, for example, like a social media manager or something like that didn't exist before. There's a saying, they have this, someone from Duke University many years ago said that 65% of kids going into primary school are going to end up in jobs that don't exist now. And so a lot of those jobs are through our devices. And so anything that's through that, you can do it. I don't really know what I'd give for advice for that. Just find something that works. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. I'm amazed at the new professions that keep coming up. Like, I mean, content creator, it's probably 10 years old now, right? But before that.
Yeah. And the different niches that could be Instagram or Twitter or TikTok. People in TikTok, they make like 400,000. And just like that'll be like 15.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a data scientist, and he has a PhD, and that said data science as a field is still defining itself, and there's not a clear definition for it yet. And he said it's it's like now it's just quite open, but I think with time it will be like more they will find what does it mean. It's just when he said that, it's like amazing how they just moving forward, and and still some of the stuff is they still don't really understand what is it yet. So, but people are working in that field, and it's quite interesting how things are just moving very very fast.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay. Chance, do you have anything more you want to say? Or I know you're probably getting a little sleepy. 2:30. A little bit.
Yeah. No, I've got nothing else. Everybody has any other questions? Happy to answer them. But other than that, no.
No, I really appreciate you taking the time and kind of giving us some ideas. I wanted to thank you again for taking the time. I'd probably reach out to you offline to get your probably your parents' address, and I'm gonna send you a free deck of playing cards, courtesy
Oh,
of
awesome.
freeCodeCamp. Each card has a famous programmer on it. It's our little thank you token to our guest speakers.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Emily, as always, for providing excellent questions and helping me moderate. I want everyone I will be saving the chat, all the links that we saved, and I'll be posting it with the YouTube video when I put online, and I'll be spreading the video once it's all cut and good to go. Chingu.io is where you're going to sign up. If you're interested in taking a voyage, there is a ton of articles on Medium. I suspect if you do Google, you're going to see lots of information about Chingu and signing up. They did an excellent job just with the handbook. And in my ranting video, when I did my voyage, we spent a whole week just setting up that developmentor workflow that Chance had mentioned. And they put all that in their survival, I want to call it the survival handbook, but it really, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Other teams had already gone through the process. And so the fun was not us trying to figure out how to do things. It was just us figuring out how to do things together. And it was a really fun experience. And I can't wait to participate again in a future one. And that's it. That's it, everybody. I want you to enjoy your weekend and stay safe so we can have another good meeting next time. And thanks again, Chance, for sacrificing your sleep. Really appreciate it.
Apologize if I fell out of it.
No,
thanks a lot.
no, you were on.
Fun.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Well,
Have a good one. Ciao.
Bye. Lovely weekend.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adeline.